We first collaborated on making Robin Hood Gardens Rewound when Nathan and I were both studying at Goldsmiths, University of London back in 2019. We both shared interests in art made with GANs and Mark Fisher's work on hauntology. So we began exploring the points where our interests intersect to explore ways to tell interesting human stories by using machine learning tools. Because of our proximity to London's urban environment, one of our group's personal upbringing, and the presence of the issues surrounding London in the 70s and 80s, we looked into brutalist architecture of social housing projects in London. We even considered tackling the social housing deficit, but the scope was too extensive, so we opted to hone in on a particular council housing estate.
Robin Hood Gardens is a council estate in East London built in the 60s. Designed by Alison and Peter Smithson, the estate was intended to nurture an egalitarian way of living and a communal organisation that is rooted in visions of a benevolent post-welfare state. That vision never materialised. Sharing the fate of many council estates of that era, Robin Hood Gardens became associated with crime, drugs and civil decay over the 70s, 80s and 90s. Some believe that the deterioration was because of the flaws inherent in the estate's brutalist architecture and design. Some felt that it reflected the larger civil and economic decline in the UK, following the rise of Thatcherism and the shift to neoliberal solutions towards social policies. What remains today of Robin Hood Gardens is a sprawling complex of dilapidated, under-occupied homes planned for demolition.
In this work, we explored ways to tell a narrative through machine learning using generative adversarial network, or GANs. For that, we cast the neural network as the ghost, navigating the environment of Robin Hood Gardens based on a corpus of historical image data. The neural network creates a model based on this data and regenerates the iconic facade of the estate from the new perspectives and times. And we paired this generative imagery with narrated conversation transcripts taken from the book, Regeneration, Conversations, Drawings, Archives, and Photographs from Robin Hood Gardens by Jesse Brennan. The conversations range from architects, ex-residents, and locals from the area. The disparate recollections of this lived experience are reflected in the hallucinatory nature of the visuals and together form Robin Hood Gardens Rewound.
There's history there, and you can't just make history. The people make a place, and a lot of people made that estate. It was good because that estate had a lot of long-term tenants.
Yeah, and they were talking about how they wanted streets in the sky, which was quite interesting, but I don't think it worked out because there isn't much communication between residents here, not on our floor anyway. And it's interesting how what they wanted didn't actually happen, so now they're just knocking it down.
First thing the council can see fading, but also see ways to find relationships that last.
And how might a visitor to Robin Hood Gardens describe the estate?
A 60s concrete brutalist 6-storey building with windows and balconies or terraces to walk along. It does look like half of an ocean liner ploughing through the sea of lesser-sized housing.
I can't remember the word they used. It was something to do with gritty.
Brutalist?
Yeah, I think it was brutalist.
The repeated changes of philosophy leads to a kind of amnesia about earlier.
Well, yeah, because there are a lot of council houses here and people are used to this area. It's like they're driving us away to replace us with more wealthy people. I guess other people maybe think of it something like a taboo subject. People don't really want to talk about it.
Last night I was walking home, came home late. I was just under the block and I looked and the estate was dark, but it was lit in little patches and it looked beautiful. Seriously, it did. And I stood there for a moment and I thought, wow, the realisation that it's going to be gone. There's history there and you can't just make history. The people make a place. And a lot of people made that estate.
Using ontology as our theoretical guide, we hone in on the spectrality of the neural network and the fading memory of Robin Hood Gardens. First, we should explain briefly what ontology is. Jacques Derrida coined the term ontology, blending the word haunting, that implies inhabitation, and ontology, the study of being. According to him, the way we make sense of the present is by comparing it to the past while expecting the future. The present moment that we experience is not always complete because it's already mixed up with absence. Hence, we use the figure of the ghost as that which is neither present nor absent, neither dead nor alive, to represent this absence.
The late theorist and cultural critic Mark Fisher suggests that these ghosts of failed utopian aspirations persist in haunting our contemporary lives, or what he termed nostalgia of a lost future. Indeed, Robin Hood Gardens is emblematic of this temporal disjunction, a discarded relic from a future that never came to be. We identify the same ghostly qualities in the generative neural network, which is inherently neither present nor absent. The process is akin to the approximation of the imprecise nature of memory itself.
We are interested in Mark Fisher's application of ontology, his critique on how the cultural and media landscape of recycled retro aesthetics has incapacitated us to think beyond social norms, hence a failure to imagine an alternate system out of capitalism. As an example, electronic music's confrontation with the cultural impasses highlights the failure of the future of this contemporary era. In the same spirit, we responded and accepted Fisher's call for action. We resurrected the neural network goals as a provocateur to dislodge the static narrative of the present.
As a medium, neural networks are temporally constrained. They depend on a dataset composed of past times and places. They perform a kind of statistical forecasting with the network calibrated to respond to new data based on the best fit explanation of what came before. Generative adversarial networks, GANs, were invented by Ian Goodfellow in 2014 and introduced the idea of competition into the network. By matching the generator network with a discriminator network, the resulting competition between the two accelerates and enhances the quality of the results. For the first iteration of this project, we used a GAN called Pix2Pix. Pix2Pix is a conditional GAN, which augments the learning process with more information about the images in the dataset. In this case, by isolating different architectural features of the imagery, such as windows and balconies, it helps the network form a better model of what it's looking at. Our initial datasets consisted of archival photography of Robin Hood Gardens, comprising separate day and night images.
Once the analysis is completed by Pix2Pix, we input new blueprints of Robin Hood Gardens generated in open frameworks based on a 3D template of the estate. This program generates new animated sequences. The separate elements of the building grow over time, and we reposition the camera to observe this new facade from different viewpoints.
For the most recent version of the work, we used Pix2Pix HD and created an updated dataset based on our own photography from the site. In the exhibition, we framed the film across two screens, one an analog TV, and on the wall behind, a large projection of the label animation. The television exhibits spectral artifacts inherent with analog technology, evoking deep cultural memory and nostalgia, while the projected image is large, HD, digital, crisp. The hallucinatory aesthetics of the GAN foreground its accidental materialities and link it back to the imperfect technology from an earlier age.
To conclude, Robin Hood Gardens Rewound is an illustration of this paradox in the trajectory of technological progress. The work finds parallel with past endeavors to change the world and the promises of technological utopianism of today. As artists, we feel compelled to interfere critically with the hegemony of ideas and narratives within this techno-capitalist structure we partake in.
This work echoes the lamentation of a promised future that never came to be. But beyond mourning what has been lost, Robin Hood Gardens Rewound aims to carve an autonomous space where forgotten potentials are reactivated, so we can imagine an alternate, diverse, more evenly distributed future to the one which is presented to us.
Thank you very much. So, Eddie, Nathan, did you have like the same reasons that Alke mentioned?
Oh, you go, Nate.
To tell you the truth, I missed the start of that question because I was reading the one that's in the chat there. So I'm happy to.
Why did you use this object that I would call, like, to a certain extent, the opposite to digital something that is relevant, would be relevant to digital environment? So to me, London's residential estate, so built some time ago, is something that is more like contrasting to something intangible, because it's like when we mean digital world, we mean something intangible, right, compared to like the building.
Yes, I think something that's interesting about this particular kind of technology is that it's inherently built out of memories from the past. Like every data set, every image set, every wodge of data that you feed a neural network is from somewhere, from some other place in time. And London as a location has an enormous history, and we're surrounded by it. So while this technology is quite cutting edge and it's moving at a breakneck kind of speed, so an interesting application for its use is this intersection with this brand new technology, which I really liked the way that Ali and Andrew spoke about the Canoe project, the way working with the AI as a sort of co-pilot or something, because you end up sort of, even though you know what it is on a mechanical, technical level, the process of working with this new technology kind of leads you to quite human places, or at least anthropomorphize. You know, you end up sort of trying to coax it into a place. And so picking Robin Hood Gardens as a location for our project, I mean, as we mentioned in the video, we sort of, like, we did this together at Goldsmiths. So this was our first kind of student project. So we were still kind of learning about research, and initially our scope was very broad. So we sort of focused down on this one location. And it's got a very interesting history because it was born out of a certain kind of philosophy and design intent. And then today it's half demolished. It will be shortly completely demolished. And there's a tension there between the sort of the promise and the delivery of the promise. So that's what we're kind of interested in exploring. And this technology is built out of, you know, past promises or past, you know, space-time matterings, to use them, Karen Barad. You know, it's a collection of things from the past brought into the future and reconfigured. So I think that's a bit of a sprawling answer, but that's kind of why we chose the location and the topic.
Wow. So you killed me when you said it's a student project. So I think we have a great question from Sunny Cheung, and I don't know, maybe Eddie, you would wish to elaborate on that. But it's true. So Sunny Cheung already said that the conversation seems to be moving to the question naturally. Still, I think that your question is more interesting and precise than mine, because, and I think that we can restate it to readdress to all the speakers, as the effect of the 3D visualizations can serve or even act as a type of collective nostalgic mourning. Now it is gone. Do we in fact, by visualizing the data in this way, even kind of enable harmful destructive policies that we seek to avoid in the first place, because we kind of have means to access them through alternative means, even embedding a look of hazy nostalgic memory, other than in physical reality? Well, I would say so. It's a question about, I had a broader question. In general, are your projects about nostalgia in general? And yes, like when I mentioned like these harmful destructive policies, enabling harmful destructive policies, so if we could reframe it to readdress to everyone, I would ask, like, in general, should we all think of avoiding bias when we work with the past, with something that is tangible and real, or was tangible and real? So I think both questions are related to each other. So what do you say? So Eddie, maybe you could say something.
Yeah. Let me just. I mean, I'm not completely 100% getting the question. I think, yeah, it's heading towards what Nathan has initially answered.
What do you think? Is your project about nostalgia?
Yeah, in a way it kind of is, but it's not passive nostalgia. It's not like chain stroking, looking back in the past and romanticizing. the estate and social housing in general. I think what we're trying to get at is just exploring the tension between what was promised and what was not delivered. And that tension is what kind of that we wanted to explore and expand it on further. So yeah, it's not just, 'cause we really believe that the limit, like, you know, kind of like Mark Fisher's philosophy is that what we lack is not an inability to kind of revolutionize the capitalist system, but it's more like the lack of imagination to move forward, to think about an alternative system that we live in. So by going back into the past, into these certain modes of nostalgia, we could probably find like areas of potentials that are unexplored and unfulfilled, that in order for us to kind of move forward, to start even thinking about imagining and speculating about an alternative future. So yeah.
The thing I'd just like to mention about
Yeah, Nathan, thank you.
yeah, but the question from Sunny in the chat is quite interesting, and it also touches on the aesthetics of machine learning. And I think that that's obviously a big part of this conference is going to be works that look amazing, and this, we all kind of are familiar probably by now with the style of machine learning looks, and it's fascinating. I find it fascinating, and I think it's definitely part of our zeitgeist. But I think, I think the more you learn about it, the more interesting it gets, because you realize that it's not and it's not some sort of appropriation or filter or when you see our Robin Hood Gardens project and you see that the images look blurry and distorted, it's not because we're intentionally making them look blurry and distorted. It's because there's not enough data to fill the gaps, and our data set is limited. And that in turn speaks to the provenance of the data set, like how many samples there were. So even in the aesthetics of the medium, you actually learn a lot about the underlying kind of technology. And that's why some of these early machine learning tests are quite interesting. Like the state-of-the-art stuff that's just coming out is starting to look photoreal, and that's interesting in a different way. But I'm particularly fascinated with these early giant leaps that machine learning was going through, because you could actually see the materiality of this new medium start to kind of solidify. So I just like to say that we're not sort of trying to use this aesthetic as a kind of, you know, we're not trying to sort of just use it as a look. It's actually part of the work. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think we were trying to work, like Nate and I was interested in working with small data set and see what comes out of it. And it just happens that, yeah, the aesthetic became sort of what is known now as vaporwave, which is quite common in sort of that kind of post-retro 90s video look. But no, we're not going for that look.
Yeah, secretly, Eddie just wanted to make something that was vaporwave, and that's what happened. So.